All right, well, we are back. We've got Michael Davis with the Utah Snowmobile Association. This has been with Blue Ribbon Coalition, and we also have Simone with Blue Ribbon Coalition. We're talking about how snowmobiling will be impacted in the Manti-La Sal Forest Plan revision that's occurring right now. And we just came back from a break. And one of the other things we've talked a lot about, there are probably at least 3 times in the recreation section of this plan where they bring up that if there are impacts to wildlife, that there should be closures, and so I have concerns that wildlife sometimes gets weaponized to justify closures, where I don't think the impacts are really as severe as what sometimes gets claimed. Michael, I mean, you've been out snowmobiling all over the state. How frequent are you really running into wildlife when you're out on your sled?
It's rare, very rare. Once in a while, I would say, leaving the trailhead, you might go up the trail where it's groomed in the lower elevations. That you might see a moose here and there, but that's the extent of it. You don't see anything. I've never seen anything other than that.
Have you ever run over any hibernating frogs?
I mean, I have no idea.
Okay.
If they're there, they're about. I mean, I don't know how deep a frog is in the dirt, but we're usually on at least 3 feet of snow, or 3 to 5, hopefully more. So, if there's a frog down there, it's a long way down.
Yeah, well, I think that they're a long way down, and I think their hearts actually slow down, and they go into almost like a coma state where they're unconscious of their surroundings, and they basically freeze, and then they can. The hibernating frog risk.
Well, and maybe
really
there's another misconception to clear up with that, in that being, backcountry snowmobile riders don't leave the trail unless there's at least 3 feet of based snow outside of the trail, out into the, out everywhere, outside, well, basically not on trail, 3 feet or more. I mean, 3 feet is a good base. What I think everybody targets or wants, because that covers up all the rocks, covers up all the stumps, and then anything on top of that is a bonus. So, I mean, you're talking 5 feet, 6 feet. Last year was a very down year, as we all know, snowpack wise, but we still had at least 4 to 5 feet in most areas up high, and that's where people go to ride. So
yeah, no one wants damage to their sled. And all the times that I have snowmobiled within the Manti-La Sal forest, I cannot recall any wildlife encounters.
Right. And that doesn't mean that there aren't impacts. I mean, there definitely are wildlife biologists who will go study these issues, and they'll come up with scientific studies that do document the impacts. We just have to be careful that those impacts don't get overstated. Blue Ribbon Coalition did fight to get snowmobiles allowed in Yellowstone National Park. And Yellowstone is an area where there is abundant wildlife. That's one of the key draws to the park. The wildlife impacts was one of the top concerns that anybody would have about allowing snowmobiles to go into the park during winter. And so they were required to do monitoring studies to try and see the impacts that motorized vehicle use within the park would have during the winter. And the National Park Service recently released what they found, and the announcement was to discontinue these studies because the findings were in the upper 90% that it just was not impacting anything. The animals would stop, look at the snowmobilers, and then move on with their normal business. Of being bison or elk or wolves or whatever. And so it's helpful to have a good study out there that was commissioned by a partner federal agency within the federal government that kind of demonstrates that the wildlife impacts really are minimal. But it concerns me because you get things like in this plan it says seasonal motorized use area closures should be used to protect wildlife winter range and opportunities for quiet winter recreation. And so that is, again, a section I'd probably just strike from this plan. They should only be limiting motorized use because of wildlife impacts if those impacts are truly documented and truly causing harm to species that are threatened or protected. And that the way that should work is management should then have to identify minimization criteria or some way they're going to protect the wildlife, and closure could be an option in there. Doesn't necessarily mean it should be. There are usually always going to be other management approaches other than a closure, and we just have to be, I think, abundantly cautious about the wildlife impact language that gets put into these plans, because it isn't very hard to manufacture overblown impacts, and we have seen the groups that want to shut down motorized recreation do that. Their track record is
right. And for people out there that are watching, if they want to reference some material, I sent it over to you. It's on the American Council of Snowmobile Association's website. It's called Facts and Myths of Snowmobiling and Trail Usage and Winter Trails. And on page 18, it talks about that Yellowstone Park study that you just referenced, and the impact or lack thereof that snowmobiling has on wildlife, if any, and it's manageable. So it's definitely not, I mean, in going back to my experience up here, it's been minimal. And I can tell you for the most part, when snowmobilers respect wildlife, they don't chase, they don't disrupt, they're not out there to chase a moose or an elk or anything like that around. They want to get up high, get to the deep snow, get off trail, and have their fun in the really deep snow where there is no wildlife.
Right. So anyway, that is a comment you could make, is that any of these sections that raise concerns about wildlife impacts by motorized vehicle use, that they should be rooted in the best available science, and that wildlife impacts shouldn't be directly used to jump straight to the conclusion of needing a closure. It's just that if there's a wildlife impact, it needs to be managed. Doesn't mean the area needs to be closed. There's a few other little things we've got in the plan, and then we can wrap this up. There's one section where it says roads and trails are not generally used when covered with snow or saturated soils to prevent damage to the travel way, associated features, and other resources. I don't think when the person that wrote that sentence thought about snowmobile use. Like, there should be this is sometimes what you call just like a drafting error. They probably just had an oversight. Of course we're going to use trails when they're covered with snow if we're doing it for over snow vehicle use. And so they need to just add in a sentence that says, other than for over snow vehicle use, roads and trails are not generally used when covered with snow. And so those are the kinds of things that if you made a comment to that regard, they'd probably fix that little section, because it was probably just a drafting oversight in the plan. A group like ours is going to catch that and make sure they're not inadvertently putting language in there that says we shouldn't be using roads and trails that have snow on it, because
that's the only time we're going to use them for OSV.
Yeah. So, and then the final thing is there's kind of this, like, another example of something like that where there's kind of contradictory statements in this plan. They say that they're going to update their motor vehicle use map every year. That's ambitious. I've seen forests that I've been working on updating motor vehicle use maps for 10 years, and they're still working on it. But we support them in updating their motor vehicle use map on a regular basis, because it is incredibly common that they miss roads and trails that should be part of the map. And to have a regular yearly process where we can revisit that map and update it, that's the way we can get roads that are currently missing from the map into the official map so they can be designated as open and used. But then they say roads and trails not on the system should be closed to motorized use unless motorized use is authorized under a permit. That's contradictory. They're saying they're going to update their map every year, but then they're saying if there's roads and trails not in the system, meaning on the map, that it should be closed to motorized use. I think it'd be more appropriate to say that roads and systems should be analyzed in the annual update of the motor vehicle use map every year to be determined whether they should be closed or open. To say they should just be closed as the default position, again, is hardwiring closure into the plan, and we oppose that. And so that's an inconsistency. Those are two conflicting statements. That's something we want to clear up in a plan like this generally. So, Michael, are you still there?
I am. It's
okay. Sorry, you kind of.
I'm definitely.
Sounded like you broke off a little bit, but I'm just kind of curious. I think we've covered most of the main points we wanted to cover in this plan as they relate to snowmobiling. I know you just recently were made the public land director of the Utah Snowmobile Association, and I want to just give you kind of some final thoughts of what are some things you've learned as kind of a new appointee in this position, as far as how this process works, what our community needs to do better to be engaged, and just what you personally have learned from diving into a plan like this and seeing how this works.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, before we started recording, when I stepped into this role last spring up until now, it's been a lot of information that I've been trying to pick up on and learn how this works. So the gentleman that I took over for, he kind of gave me a brief on what was up and coming here in Utah. And it was the two more important things at the moment are this current revision on the Manti-La Sal, and the other one that's already in progress further down the road over on the Ashley National Forest out in northeastern Utah. That one is much further along than this one. But just learning the process, the 4 steps that they use. I mean, in the first initial step, which I believe is where we are now on the Manti-La Sal, there's a lot of pieces of land that they are looking at that could possibly be designated as wilderness. Just to give an example, I believe the Ashley started out with 27 sections of different land. And then it went through their filtering process, if you will, and now they've whittled it down to 4 pieces of land that's going to be coming out next month on the environmental impact statement, which will then either all 4, maybe none, maybe 1 or 2 could be designated as wilderness, which would be attached to the already established Uinta wildlands that's up there. But that all being said, learning that and figuring out and learning all the literature, how it all works, there's a lot there, and it's not going away. So as snowmobilers or OHV users in general, we need to get involved, and I think that starts with joining your clubs, joining a snowmobile club, which the snowmobile club here, or snowmobile clubs here in Utah, fall underneath the umbrella of the Utah Snowmobile Association. And under the Utah Snowmobile Association, we do have the public land side of it, which is where I am now. And we're definitely 100% behind creating awareness and getting everybody informed on what is going on, basically in the Western United States, but more so here in Utah, and how it could affect us moving forward.
Right. And what's your website?
It's the Utah Snowmobile Association, but it's under utahsnow.org. Let me grab a card and we can just kind of hold it up there. Will that work?
Yeah, well, we'll put a link to that. That's why I asked. We'll put utahsnow.org as a link under the video.
I'm sorry, I said that.
That's where people can go.
I said that backwards. It's snowutah.com.
Okay, snowutah.com. So we'll have a good live link. And
I think what Michael's saying, I mean, it can be very daunting and overwhelming to get involved in these processes, and can be confusing at times. And so that's why we're here. We're trying to simplify things, trying to make it understandable for everybody. and make being active in the process very easy. We've mentioned sharetrails.org, that we make it easy for you to submit a comment, and we're trying to make it as accessible to be involved and engaged as we possibly can make it for you.
Yeah. And any feedback's appreciated once this is up. Any feedback from anybody out there that watches this is appreciated on how we can do better. This is, as we've talked about, the first one we have done, and we want to do more moving forward. So anybody that would like to comment and help us out what they would like to hear in the next talk, that would be awesome. We're trying to help you and have you help us, and we're going to help each other out and try to stay on the front edge of this.
Yeah, and that's part of why the groups like us exist. I strongly recommend that everyone become a member of either a local club, Utah Snowmobile Association. I mean, people, like individuals, can join the Utah Snowmobile Association, right?
Yes, anybody can join. If you join through a club, then part of your membership dues for the club will go to the association. So then you're a part of the association too. You're a member that way as well. Or if you're in southern or central Utah where there might not be any clubs, or if you just don't want to join a club, that's fine. You can still get on and join the association as a member.
Yep. And we'll have a link to that. And then you can also go to sharetrails.org/join is how you become a member of our organization. And what you'll find is that we both kind of fill a different role. The Utah Snowmobile Association is kind of focused on the Utah areas and the Utah clubs, and they get involved in a lot of the volunteer efforts. They're the ones with the relationships with Department of Natural Resources. Blue Ribbon Coalition, we actually look at this in a national level. We engage in all of these plans on your behalf at a what I would say is a more professional level, where we're really going to dive into this plan, look at the legal ramifications of what's happening, and we're always looking at the longest potential game, which is if something happens that we don't like and that we think is going to hurt users like you, then we have the potential to litigate the challenge, the decisions, and that's what we're doing in California. That took several years of work for us to tee that up and be part of that, along with some of the groups out there that are actually leading that effort. We're part of it as a co-plaintiff. But that is a process that takes years, and our organization only exists when people join and become members, and that's how we have the resources to make sure that we can commit to these fights for those extended periods of time and be effective, and it does require that. We do need you to comment on these things intermittently, but that strengthens our position. But you do need an organization like ours committed to the longest potential time frame of how long these fights can last, and we're one of the few organizations that do it. And so we appreciate everyone for paying attention to this. We're going to spread this around to our members. I understand Michael's going to do everything he can to get it out to the Utah Snowmobile groups and associations, and we hope that you take some time, a few minutes at least, to go submit a comment on this Manti-La Sal plan, and we'll be keeping you updated on the future developments of this plan. As Michael said, we've got the Ashley National Forest is in the works, and I think you'll find with the Biden administration that a lot of these kinds of plans are now moving forward. I think they put them on the shelf, and now the agencies have gotten very active, and it's a time where we definitely need our users paying attention, focused, and engaging when we ask them to. So I think we can wrap this up, and we'll definitely connect again soon, Michael, and we'll have a lot more to talk about. I think this is an important, this little plan here, but I think there's a lot of other big issues. You and I have talked about the search and rescue and safety components. I think we could have a great discussion about that in a future conversation.
And just so you know, and I think I told you earlier, there is one of the guys in our association, he does podcasts, Sled Addicts Nation. If you want to look it up online, maybe you already have. He would be more than happy to facilitate something or step in if you wanted to facilitate it, however you wanted to work it. I'm super stoked that you reached out and you guys are willing to help out in this fashion. Like, this is This is really good, and I apologize deeply for my connection problems tonight. Sorry to keep you up so late. I know this wasn't supposed to go this long.
I think it'll work, and so I think we'll be okay. And we had the conversation we needed to have, and now the trick is to get it out to the members and the users and make sure they get engaged. So we'll work on that, have it out here in the next day or two, so there's still time for people to watch it and get their comments in before October 25th. So we'll let you go, Michael, and we'll be in touch for future conversation here soon.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
Okay. What's that?
Just said thanks.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.